This is the Moon Eagles Wrestling Podcast, and it's kind of a random day. So we're just going to kind of go with it. That cool with you? Cool. Again, welcome to the Moon Eagles Wrestling Podcast. I am your host, Juan L. Hearn, more affectionately known as the Moon. And so the plan was to do a WWE draft episode of the show where I would pick like 5 or 10 people from each show and kind of shift them around to see how I like the new storylines. But two factors that changed my mind. One, I feel like I'm doing way too many episodes that involve strictly WWE. And if anyone's catching this show, which there actually are a few of you, so shout out to you all. Thank you. Leave comments so I know who's here. I don't want to be so WWE focused where everything is WWE related. There is more wrestling out there than just the Federation. So for me, I thought, well, let me see what else is going on in wrestling. This is being recorded on Thursday, the 25th of April. So since the last episode, we've had SmackDown, we've had Raw. We're leading into the draft. Haven't had the draft yet. We've had NXT. There was a TNA wrestling pay per view. We've had Dynamite last night. We're going to talk a lot about that one. And we're going to address a couple of the issues that the internet wrestling community have been having. Let's get into it. First things first, I want to give a personal shout out. Just a shout out to Corey Graves. Because as things are shifting in WWE on the commentary table, I think Corey Graves has been doing a pretty damn good job. He's shifting out of that heel color commentator role and getting more into the play-by-play JR Michael Cole type of role. And I think he's doing a really, really good job with it. And as much attention as we give, Samantha Irving in the announcing position, greatest announcer of all time, I think it's only fair that we also give some recognition to Corey Graves. Michael Cole is still Michael Cole, but I think Corey Graves, once Michael Cole gets to that point where he's ready to let it go or retire or do something else off screen, Corey Graves is lining up to be that guy. And I'm cool with that. I wasn't always at first, but I'm cool with that. So just wanted to make that note. Also, I had a question that I posed to anyone who happens to watch this, and I'm also going to pose this question on Twitter, which is still Twitter, and you'll find this question on my account at DL Hearn Writes. So the question is, if in this draft, NXT is supposed to be recognized as the official third brand, no longer developmental, not just where people move up and the upgrade is Raw and SmackDown. If it's all going to be level playing field from here forward, do we get rid of the NXT special events like Halloween Havoc, Stand and Deliver, Spring Breakout? Do we get rid of those, or do we add more little weekly special editions to Raw and SmackDown, like NXT did with Spring Breakout, and like AEW does with Winter is Coming, for example. Do we get rid of them or not? Do we add more to Raw and SmackDown or not? Answer in the comments. Tweet me once you find the tweet. Once I actually send it, which I'll send it after I post this. All right, now some TNA stuff. Much to, I guess, some people's surprise, Matt Hardy returned to TNA, and he returned to TNA in the broken Matt Hardy gimmick. This is a big deal for a couple of different reasons. The first reason being, everyone thought he was going to go to WWE and be part of the new Wyatt Six. At least everyone was kind of hopeful, figuring that the connection that Woken Matt Hardy had with Bray Wyatt at one point would kind of be the interlocking connection. Everyone, of course, under the leadership of Dallas, Uncle Howdy. Um, Everyone was expecting that, so to see him pop up in TNA was a surprise. However, Matt Hardy says he's not signed with TNA. My understanding of that contract is he's still a free agent. He's just contracted to a couple of episodes here and there and whatnot. And I think that's a really interesting place to be for professional wrestling. And I'm curious of how many other wrestling organizations are going to be willing to do that with a wrestler with the name and history like a Matt Hardy, where maybe you pop up in a storyline in TNA, and then maybe you pop up in the storyline for WWE. Are you a part of a major faction? Can WWE put you in a major faction when you're just, contract to contract, week by week? Is that a gamble that we're willing to take as any organization to put you in major story? Now, of course, there is some precedent for that. I mean, Matt Hardy's doing it now. Matt Cardona, literally everywhere till he got injured. Get well soon. Um, so that's really the kind of the question: is this the direction professional wrestling is going? Where if you can make yourself viable, if you can make yourself, you can put that price tag. You show you're worth that price tag. You can put the infamous butts in seats. Do we end the long-term contracts? Is it more profitable to go show to show wherever they're willing to pay you? I mean, you listen to people like Top Dollar, and Top Dollar will tell you, or AJ Francis, forgive me, people like AJ Francis and he'll tell you that like he's making more money now just wherever somebody's willing to write a check. It's a lot more freedom for the individual wrestler. It's less money, I kind of think, overall for the organization, but does that help with story? Because let's remember, professional wrestling is the greatest form of theater, and the thing that's the most important is story. Can you tell a story with a fleet of part timers? I think you can. It just depends on, as long as you got your contracted people on your mainstay stories, I guess your elite stories or your bloodline stories. I think if you have contracted people for that, maybe just contract some people some in and outs. Yeah, you should be fine. But I think it's a really interesting thing that's going to be explored a little bit longer to see how other wrestlers, play into this thing. There's another news factor, and I'm going to go ahead and get into that now. There's no point in waiting. There is I think it was the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, ruling to end non-compete clauses. Now, this is just kind of posed. They've passed something, but nothing's official yet. And what this would do is it would end all non-compete clauses. Now, this doesn't apply to wrestling solely. This applies to literally any company. I guess if you worked, um, let's say you were part of Ford and you moved to Chevrolet or General Motors or whatnot, then you might have some proprietary secrets or being involved in some things that maybe your competitor wouldn't want you to know. So there's a reason why they don't want you to jump ship for a similar industry for a period of time. Now in wrestling, we're used to things like a 30-day or 90-day non-compete clause. But I'm sure in other organizations, it's 1 year, 5 year, maybe even 10 year, depending on what the industry is or the role. And while this doesn't have anything to do with non-disclosure agreements, and it doesn't apply to people in like corporate offices, but if you're like an assembly worker, or in our case, a professional wrestler, this would apply to you in theory. So, how do you feel about not having wrestlers bound by non-compete clauses? You can literally work a show on Monday for the WWE on Raw and then be on Dynamite the very next day if you got fired on Tuesday. Why not? That leads into that, you know, Matt Hardy free agency thing. I think this really does open doors of opportunity for professional wrestling. Why not? If you feel like you want to be contracted by the WWE or a Cody Rhodes or a Jey Uso or Roman Reigns, sure. But we also seen what happens when you have someone like a Kenny Omega, who for the longest time was going back and forth between AEW and TNA and New Japan and doing whatever else. They're going back and forth, and now Kenny Omega is showing up on all these shows with all these different titles. You can explore a lot more. You can do a lot more. Right now, John Moxley is the IWGP Heavyweight Champion. He's the world champion of New Japan, but he just defended the title on AEW. And we see that exchange a lot between those two companies as they have Forbidden Door. And I feel like this always works towards Forbidden Door. But what does that say about the future state of professional wrestling? Will a lack of non compete clauses help WWE, for example, retain more wrestlers? Are they going to be slower to give contracts in the first place? Slower to release from contracts, knowing that immediately they'll be available for other bookings? It's just kind of curious as to how that ends up playing out. So, between the Matt Hardy situation of free agency and how this is working with TNA and how this potentially could work with future arrangements with AEW and or WWE, I'm really curious to see how that plays out. As the Federal Trade Commission is working on all these different factors for non-compete clauses as they apply to all industries, but this will should include WWE. I'm curious to see how that plays out too. My hands are dry. So curious. Now to congratulate some people. There's three in particular. First and foremost, Miss Willow Nightingale, the new TBS champion, winning her championship match at Dynasty against Julia Hart. We knew she was going to get a world title. We knew she was going to get a title. I wanted her to be AEW World Women's Championship, as I predicted at the beginning of the year. But you know what? There's a belt on Willow Nightingale. I cannot complain about that. She is championship material. She deserves every bit of it. And honestly, sky's the limit as far as this is concerned. But this leads into something very, very tricky. Mercedes Monet, obviously the former Sasha Banks, already has the next, she's up next at Double or Nothing. she'll be facing Willow Nightingale. There's a lot of talk right now about certain hires that have recently joined AEW, and it's a lot of negativity. Uh, they feel like some of the recent hires, like Mercedes Monet, are kind of pointless because Mercedes has been there for about a month or two and has literally not done anything. Now, my understanding is she's got an injury, and if she has an injury, that's cool. But then that asks the questions: do you wait until the injury is past before you introduce her? Do you make the injury known so we don't have an expectation up front? I don't know. Either one of those could have gone because people listen. People are going to have a complaint either way. No matter how this plays out, there's going to be a complaint. So there's no real reason for being super upset. But Mercedes could have done something, and she's got this thing out for Willow because of the previous interactions in New Japan with Mercedes' injury that kept her out for about a year or so. So I like that the built-in story is present, but I don't know because what we're leading up to is Willow Nightingale, who is a beloved babyface. Everyone loves to see succeed. Everyone wants to win. Versus Mercedes Monet, who has been dragging this debut out, leading from the time she showed up in AEW and declared herself all elite to the point in time where she's going to have her first real match. If this is her first match, can she lose it? And to me, that's the real question. And that leads me into questions about booking. Do we book someone we don't want to lose against someone brand new who shouldn't be losing? You've hyped up Mercedes Monet. You gave her great music. She got the CEO chant going. She's interrupting Willow at every turn, automatically involved in the mix of the championship. And I'm like, you got a brand new champion and you have a brand new wrestler to AEW. And I don't know if I'm comfortable with either one of them losing, which means you might have a run in, you may have a disqualification or a contest, and that's unsatisfying. I don't know what we're doing here. I have questions. I have questions. I don't know what we're doing here with the TBS championship scenario. Putting the belt on Willow, the right call. Taking Mercedes all the way to the top right off, she's a big enough name. Why not? That's the thing. Now you have this brand new champ versus the new hire, and I don't like this. Maybe you could have had Julia Hart win the title under nefarious reasons or by disqualification. Willow actually wins, but Julia keeps the title. So it's Julia versus Mercedes. So it's not a brand new champion losing to Mercedes Monet. Um, Maybe we could have had Willow versus Mercedes for a contendership. Either way it goes, I'm not sure how I'm feeling about the way this Willow versus Monet match is going to go. But hey, we have till Double or Nothing to figure that out, and hopefully they'll figure it out by then, and the story will make a little bit more sense. In the meantime, congratulations to Willow Nightingale on becoming the new TBS champion. After that, Trick Williams, your brand new NXT champion. Honestly, I wasn't sure how that match was going to go, but I'm really glad to see that Trick Williams made it to that top level. Him as the NXT champion is right where he needs to be right now. He's got all the momentum. And this is a sign of where WWE takes somebody who's got all that momentum on them and does something with it, puts the belt on him. He lost to Iliad a couple times, overcame when it really mattered. Iliad, Ilya and Carmelo, along with a couple of others, are likely going to be switched Raw SmackDown. I don't want to say call up anymore, so I'm really trying to get out of that habit. If we're going to look at NXT as a third brand, we've got to pull away from the terms like call up and call down and whatever shifted from one side to another. Um, yeah, I think that's a good call, and I think the right call for the draft would be to leave Trick on NXT. Not just because he's the NXT champion now, but I think this is a space where you're losing potentially Dragunov, you're losing potentially um, Carmelo Hayes. So now there's a separation there. That's good. You're losing potentially Tony D'Angelo, preferably the entire family. Get that in a second. And I think that's cool. But then you gotta make space for your next gen, your next generation of people. So absolutely. Yeah, you need to get Trick Williams in there to lead the charge for your next group of guys. Let's do it. Let's have your Trick Williams and your Lexus Kings and your Oba Femis and all these different dudes. This is where we need to be. This is the direction we need to go. Tony D'Angelo. Come on. I wasn't a fan of this overly stereotypical New York, New Jersey Italian dude gimmick that he had from Jump Street. Wasn't a fan. When he became the Don, you gotta say it like that. I wasn't feeling it. Give it to him. I'm behind the character now. I'm behind him in Stacks. I'm behind him with with Rizzo and Crucifani. The D'Angelo family is a solid faction now. It's making waves. I'm about that. What I don't like is the idea of drafting just D'Angelo or just D'Angelo and Stacks. You've taken the time to build the faction, draft the faction, or don't draft them at all. Honestly, I think, personal opinion, which this entire show is personal opinion, Tony D'Angelo and Trick Williams, now where they stand, is the equivalent of Carmelo Hayes, Braun Breaker. You had that Samoa Joe, Shinsuke Nakamura pairing. Those two top guys were looking at becoming world champion, top champion. I think this is where uh, Tony D'Angelo needs to be. He needs to be in that space with Trick Williams leading NXT. You no longer have Braun there. You're going to probably lose uh, Baron Corbin. You're going to probably lose Dragunov. You're going to probably lose Hayes. Um, I can probably see a few women from the division shifting up. Maybe Lyra Valkyria to SmackDown. Um Roseanne Perez could go to Raw. Maybe. Either way it goes, however they decide to shift that and move that, I think it's important that you leave some of your current stars on NXT so that they can do the things. Because if you don't, then you're going to spend a lot of time rebuilding stories in your main event scene. Think of a brand new TV series. Normally, everything comes back to wrestling, but I'm gonna shift everything. I'm gonna shift this back to regular TV. One of my favorite sci-fi TV shows is Stargate SG-1. I'll be very brief. But Stargate SG-1 is a very slow burn series. It's based off of a movie, so it goes from the movie, and then 1 year later goes into the TV series timeline, and it takes a little while to establish the new worlds and the new characters. There's a point in time at season 8 where they thought the show was ending. So they wrapped up all the storylines at the end of season 8 and then got picked up for season 9. But they've wrapped up everything. All the stories are over and closed. So now what do? You have to establish a new story, and that takes time. You have to have people already invested and they have to be willing to wait that out. This is what we're doing in wrestling right now with the draft situation. If you take all of your top people and just leave Trick without a D'Angelo to fight against, then I feel like there's too much reestablishment for the NXT Championship title picture. Because I don't know what else to do with it. No one else is officially in that title picture. I mean, you got Dijak, maybe Femi, maybe Lexus King should be moving in that direction. Sure. Who else? I mean, you got No Quarter. You can probably pull a an NXT champion out of that. Charlie Dempsey, probably that guy. But again, I feel like if you're going to have this faction thing, which WWE is really leaning on right now, there should be one person from that faction willing to be world champion or capable of being. That's Tony D'Angelo. That's probably Charlie Dempsey. You look at Solo Sikoa where things are going with the bloodline. Damian Priest with Judgment Day. Uh, that would probably be Noam Dar from Metaphor. There's that thing where you got to have at least one guy who is going to lead your charge. And if you're going to lead your charge, you're going to be top champ. That's where the competition has to go. So, all that aside, we'll see how that stuff all plays out, starting with the draft. That starts tomorrow, ends on Monday. Until then, congratulations are in order for Trick Williams, becoming the new NXT champion. Now, of course, we can't sit here and start talking about all these new champions without talking about the brand new AEW World Champion, Swerve Strickland. Now, we knew Swerve was going to win this world title. He called it. He called his shot, and he made it. He said he wanted to be the first black AEW champion. Now he is. Will there be one after him? Sure. Will there be another first? No. In the same way we remember uh, Ron Simmons, that's the same energy that we need to give to Swerve Strickland right now. Now, Swerve was on Dynamite just last night, and there's a lot of questions around that. There's a lot of questions as to why was he in a match early on in the show, in an eliminator match against Kyle Fletcher, when he should have been having like a celebration or something. Well, in my opinion, Swerve is working as the workhorse. He's going to show that he can outrun, outplay, outfight anyone. And if that's going to be the case, he can only do that in the ring. Swerve's not going to be your all talk champion. He's going to spit on the mic. He's not going to be all talk. He's going to show what he can do. Any excuse to show up in the ring with that belt. Now, the Kyle Fletcher element, I think, was the more important part to this. Again, everything in wrestling is about story. So I think by having the eliminator match with the champion and Kyle Fletcher from the Don Callis family, losing going into that exchange with Will Ospreay leads into everything that's going to happen with an association, in my opinion, with the Elite. I'm going to get into that here in a bit. It all works in the story. You need a swerve for that particular element of it. Uh, but more importantly, right now, is just the celebration that we have Swerve Strickland as the AEW World Champion. Now, there is the hashtag Black Excellence. And Black Excellence has usually been reserved for Black excellence. It's the excellence of Black competitors and athletes in their chosen field in sports, used a lot in professional wrestling after you had that one photograph where there was like a whole show full of Black champions, which for a company with the history WWE had, to trust so many championships and divisions to Black Stars means something, you know. So AEW's got Black World Champion, Black TBS Champion. Um, WWE's got your Latino World Heavyweight Champion. You've got your Latina NXT World Women's Champion. I remember who all the other champions are. The Japanese um, Women's Tag Team Champions. That matters. Your Latino WWE Women's Champion. Don't forget that Bailey's Latina. Her last name is Martinez. Let's not forget that. The representation of people of color and people from the Pacific Isles. Um, I believe Japan's in the Pacific, so that should count. Um, not Polynesian, but you know where I'm getting at. The representation is out there, man, and I'm loving every bit of it. Not just as a Black creator of things, but as a person, to see that not everything looks the same. That all not all the champions, that all the good ones look the same. In the same space, you have John Moxley and Swerve Strickland. In that same light, you're going to have your Roderick Strongs and your Kazuchika Okadas. I love this. I love that all of my champions don't look the same. I don't care what they look like, but they all look different. And that truly shows how widespread and global professional wrestling truly is. How inclusionary pro wrestling is. I'm not going to say should be, is. So if you're out there and you're a wrestling fan and you're not into inclusion, you probably need to go ahead and step off. I said what I said, and I said what I said. I ain't got to say it again, but I will. If you're not into inclusion, and that means champions of color, competitors of all stripes, all genders, even transgenders, step off. Professional wrestling is not for you. Professional wrestling is all about inclusion. So if you're not down with that, you know how the expression goes. Which kind of gives me like a side note when it comes to the Nyla Rose thing and how AEW was getting in trouble because Nyla Rose, who's transgender, competed in Oklahoma, and that's apparently some rule is weird. I want Nyla Rose to just lean into that so hard. I want Nyla Rose to be billed from Oklahoma. I want full JR ripoff. Hell, have JR come to the ring. I talked with this with one of my friends, and I can't remember who exactly it was. I want to say it was James Sabata. Might have been Daniel Hodge. Shout out both of y'all. Um, Daniel Hodge. That's who it was. My boy Daniel. Shout out to all my buddies too: Daniel Hodge, James Sabata, Nick Preston, Don Guillory, all my wrestling peoples. Shout out to you all. I love you all, especially the ones who are going to be there with me in July at the Imaginarium convention, where we do a whole panel on how connecting professional wrestling and every other creative art. It's going to be the greatest thing I've ever been a part of. I cannot wait for that. More on that as we get closer to it. You can go to entertheimaginarium.com and you can find out a list of panels and you'll see what I'm talking about. Right. So, Nyla Rose, the whole Oklahoma thing, lean into it. Piss Oklahoma off. Why? Do I have a vendetta against Oklahoma? Not at all. But if Oklahoma's going to talk some shit, I mean, what else is there to say? Lean into it, rock with it, go with it. So, like I said, what's next for Swerve? Let's go into that. What's next for Swerve? I kind of talked about what's next for Willow. I kind of talked about how I feel like things should go next with Trick. What's next with Swerve? At some point in time, the okay, so let's talk it out. One, we're gonna get Swerve Joe again. Joe's gonna want his match if he's still there. Two, MJF is returning soon. I can feel it. I feel that. Um, maybe I just want that. I think at some point in time, post match, probably Double or Nothing, we're gonna get the return of MJF. And Swerve MJF is gonna be a great match. It's not gonna be as hyped as Swerve versus Hangman. I say that this needs to be the era changing title reign. Okay. You had the era of the Jerichos and your Hangmans, you've had your Moxleys and your Punks and your MJFs, and you have that here. It's great. Not ignoring Omega, but we're here. We're in a new age now. I think all of wrestling is shifting. And I think that this is the point in time for AEW to really hone in on shifting things around. And I think that happens by strapping the Rocket on the Swerve's back. You already got the title around his waist, put the Rocket on his back, give him an MJF esque kind of run as far as length, and let him be that world champion where we remember him as the world champion for this period of time. You're going to have great rivalries out of Swerve. Swerve's pissed off enough people that we can do Swerve Wardlow, Swerve Adam Cole. We can do uh, Swerve Heyman, Swerve MJF, Swerve Joe again. You can bring new people in and have Swerve. You can figure out what you're doing with Keith Lee. I have no idea where Keith Lee is. I hope he's doing okay. Um, and then I would love a retirement match: Dustin Rhodes versus Swerve Strickland for the title. And I honestly think it'll be a banger. Swerve comes out on top, sends Dustin on his way in style. I think Swerve is a great last competitor for someone as incredible as Dustin Rhodes, who's had the career that Dustin Rhodes has had. There's so much you can do in this title run. Um, and all that's going to depend on the new angle we have at the end of Dynamite. Gotta love it. Man, it was it good. Man, was it good. You know what? Let me pause on that one real quick. I'm gonna get back to AEW real quick, but before I get into that, I want to touch on another thing that's been rocking people back and forth. This past Monday night on Raw, in the wake of Rhea Ripley's injury and having to forfeit the championship, Becky Lynch was dubbed the new Women's World Champion. She won that battle royal. And a lot of people are pissed off about this. Let me tell you why. They're mad because they feel like this is the time for someone new. Liv Morgan, particularly, but literally anybody but Becky. And I don't know why we're hating on the man all of a sudden, yet I kind of do. I feel like everyone is upset because Becky's been champ and it's time for someone new. We're in this new era. But let's take a moment here, real quick, real small. Come here. Becky's been champion. So has Bailey. I don't see why we're upset about Becky, but not Bailey. Both of them have been champion multiple times. I don't. I do. We want to see someone new. We want to see newer stars grow and such. And that's great. We will. You have to understand. Rhea wasn't supposed to lose the championship yet. She had stories to tell. Now she's not capable of telling that story from that position. And that's the part that everyone's kind of ignoring right now. Rhea Ripley was taking the position of she's the established world champion. She's the one to beat. And that got cemented by being the one to beat Becky Lynch, who won the Elimination Chamber. Yet the problem here is you need someone in that of that stature for the stories telling talking forward. Think of it like this. Like I said, if Liv Morgan's revenge tour started with taking out Rhea Ripley, according to Liv, the tour ends when she becomes world champion. It'd have been over already. It'd have been over Monday. Point of the story then. There isn't one. There no longer becomes one. Liv Morgan is supposed to get really, really close on her way to becoming champion. Here's why. If she's going to be champion, you have to believe it. Much of the problem that we had with the Roman Reigns title reign going as long as it did is that everyone who was a viable champion, like championship option, kept getting beaten by Roman. After a while, you almost had no more viable options until you had the new guy show up. Remember, someone asked me a few years ago. They said, "Hey, who can be the one to beat Roman? Who's going to be the one to beat Roman Reigns, take the title off of him?" And I said, "I don't know who it is, but I do know that they're not here yet. There was going to be nobody on the current roster." Shortly after that, WrestleMania came through, and Cody shows up, has his match with Seth. Following year, match with Roman, loses. Following year, match with Roman, wins. And think about what it would have done for Cody if he had won the championship last year. Sure, the title reign would have ended, but what did Cody do to really cement himself past everyone else? At that point, nothing. He beat Seth Rollins and was out for a while. Then he returned. What did he do other than that? Nothing. Just gave him chances to go through all these other hoops and jump all the other hurdles. And he earned it. He didn't do it as a Royal Rumble winner. He did it as a two-time. back to back Royal Rumble winner. They needed that. Now he's champion. Now we see it. It's all in how the story is told. And right now, for the sake of story, you need someone of Becky Lynch's caliber. Tell it. Rhea comes back. Who you're going to want to see? Rhea versus Becky. Why? Because Becky's the one holding the belt that Rhea never lost. Who else could Rhea go after? Liv Morgan. She can go after Liv Morgan right away. That rivalry is already built in when Rhea returns. But so is everything with Becky. Everyone who would otherwise be fighting Rhea Ripley can very viably, by story, fight Becky Lynch, including Nia Jax, including Liv Morgan. This is not how Liv wins the title. She can win the match by earning her shot, declaring her shot, taking her shot, and beating whoever's champion. Personally, I think Liv needs to beat Rhea because that's what we're telling the story with Liv. Liv is becoming this slightly darker, less give a fuck kind of character, and I'm here for it. You know what I mean? Yeah. You can't just hand it to her. She's got to fight for it. She's got to earn it so that it makes sense to you all. Watch it. While we're all getting mad about Becky Lynch winning the championship, trust the process. Trust the bloody process. There is a process. There's an art to telling the stories in this manner. And this is just how that is. It's not time yet for her to win the title. This isn't. Besides, she's already held the championship at least once, and so has Nia Jax. If you really want to put the belt on somebody shocking, put it on Chelsea Green. Yeah. Chelsea Green as women's champion would be hilarious. Tells a wholly different set of stories. And with Piper Niven on her side, that beautiful woman that Piper Niven is, as her bodyguard is fantastic. So yeah, put the title. You want to put the title on somebody shocking? Put it on Chelsea Green and let her and Piper Niven let them go. Hilarious. Give them 3 months with it. It's fantastic. It'd be great. All right, now closing this up because I'm surprised that this episode even took this long. Closing it up. The angle from the end of Dynamite, where you had Jack Perry's return, and he had this meeting with Tony Khan in the ring, which led to Tony Khan taking bumps. Yes, Tony Khan taking bumps. I'm here for that. Tony Khan taking bumps, getting his ass whooped by the Elite. Why? Hostile takeover. Of course. It's the McMahon Helmsley era. No, it's not going to be a direct duplicate, but it is. You're going to have this group of people who have a genuine claim to leadership, taking out the one guy who has that claim above him, and that's Tony Khan. You bring him on air, beat his ass, take him out. Now who's left to run the show but the Elite? The Bucks are elite. Okada's elite. Perry's elite. Now the Elite's running shit. They're legit running shit. That's the best. That's the best. What we have now is shifting AEW into a new era of story. Because you're going to have everything surrounding the Elite running things. Now you're going to have that heel group running the show. Have that heel influence over the cross of everything. This could be a babyface turn run for Swerve as Tony Khan comes back and tries to get Swerve to represent him in a fight against the Elite. leading to Swerve Okada. And until I said that, I didn't realize I needed to see Swerve Okada. But I need to see Swerve Okada. I need to see Swerve versus the Rainmaker, and this is going to be some pretty dope shit. I don't know what else to tell you. This is the ground floor, and the elevator is just going to go straight up. There's going to be some fantastic storylines. If you're not into AEW, now would be the time to get into it. Now would be it. On that similar note, if you're not watching SmackDown, I'm not sure how things are going to switch and turn with the draft, but I'm sure they're going to keep everything with the bloodline like intact and on par. So everything with the bloodline right now is going to be so dope. I'm so happy to see Sokoa leading the bloodline post Roman Reigns. A lot of talk about Usos getting back together, Roman teaming up with the Usos against your new second generation bloodline. Hey, however this plays out, whatever the situation is, you got Solo coming into his own. I'm here for that all damn day. And on that note, I'm kind of done. I was going to do that draft episode, and then I was like, you know what? There's so much going on and so much being discussed. I think that this is a more pertinent episode. You know, so congrats to the new champs. Shout out to Corey Graves. I'll post that question again about NXT, about whether or not we need to get rid of the NXT specials, and or if we're going to have more episodic, like just regular episode special editions. We can do either one of that. I love the direction that things are going with the Elite in AEW, and I'm curious to see how things go with non-compete clauses as we wait for this law to go into effect, if it does. I guess on that note, I, the host, Dewan L. Hearn, more affectionately known as the Moon, guess we sign off. Have a great day, guys.